On today's episode 27 of the Real Recovery Podcast, Peter and Julie welcome Jerrod Murray, Executive Director of Painted Horse Recovery. Jerrod shares his powerful journey from addiction and incarceration to becoming a leader in the recovery community. Through Indigenous cultural and spiritual practices, Jerrod found healing and now helps others do the same. Tune in to hear his inspiring story and learn about the transformative power of culturally specific recovery services.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Recovery Podcast. I'm Julie, your co-host. On this journey of healing and transformation, together with my co-host Peter, we dive into the heart of recovery, sharing stories that resonate with courage and inspiration.
That's right, Julie. Each episode is a new chapter in this vast narrative of recovery, and we're honored to bring them to you. But keep in mind the perspectives you'll hear are for informational purposes only and may not reflect the views of the podcast or our partners.
Indeed, while these conversations can be a powerful part of your recovery toolkit, they are not substitute for professional medical advice. We encourage you to seek guidance from your healthcare provider for any treatment-related decisions.
And if you're facing an immediate crisis, or if you just need to talk to someone who understands, don't hesitate to call the Recovery Crisis Line at 503-223-85. The number is also on our website. Help is available 24/7.
Now let's begin our episode
of recovery, real recovery. Peter, here on the Real Recovery Podcast with
Julie here today, and we have an amazing guest today. I'm so freaking excited. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jerrod Murray. I'm the Executive Director of Painted Horse Recovery. I also have coming up on 12 years, but no fronts. 11 years clean. My clean date's 10/19/12, and I'm excited to be here.
Cool.
Yay,
We're glad to have
12.
you. 7, just passed it, July 19th.
Nice.
I win.
You win. Not like it's a contest.
1997.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. Yeah.
Prison is some motivation. Yeah.
You found what I hear you saying is you found some motivation in prison.
I actually did. I think it was the best time out, and I needed it.
Nice.
It took me a long time to go that route.
Recently, they had the Measure 110 stuff, and also like legalizing drugs, and in my opinion was not the best move, legalizing drugs. I was the chief petitioner of recriminalization, and because of my community, we believed,
I don't disagree with you. I think people need a timeout. Like, I do.
No.
I believe that, and I believe it saved my life.
Yeah, no, people need a timeout, and jail did save my life. I also saved my life, right? But
too.
Taking that time out was what I needed. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Right.
Agreed.
In a lot of ways was that there was no thought about what services are available. There wasn't enough. There wasn't enough support for the community.
And now we are funded by Measure 110, and Measure 110 has helped a lot of grassroots organizations, right? And it's helped us do the work that we do on the street and at our centers and those places. But part of it with the decriminalization just really, I feel like it hurt more people than helped more people.
Agreed. I live on 138th off of Division.
Oh yeah, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
It's like living in the hood every day. So
Yeah.
it keeps the ghetto girl in me.
Is there communities that are more affected by policing? Yes. Let's not say that doesn't happen. That does happen.
Right.
But if you're using in public and you get caught with drugs and there's no intervention in the use, right? And I think that's the big thing, right? Is the intervention in the use, right? And so in peer services, what we do a lot, and in Painted Horse, like we'll go into the streets, we'll interact with people, and then try to be that interruption in their use to where they can
Have a moment. of
have a
clarity,
moment
yeah.
and walk them along that continuum of care, right?
Jerrod, tell me your story. Tell me how it started and how you got to where you are now.
I would say my story started with when I was younger. I would say about 11. My dad worked a lot. My mom left when I was young. So let's go back even a little bit further. So when I was 2, I was in my mom's care, and my mom was hardcore addict, and my mom left me in a hotel room for 48 hours, and then my dad And then my grandma found me and called my dad. And my dad was working in Alaska or some power lines or something like that, and then sending money back. So my grandma called my dad and was like, you need to come get your boy. Like, he can't be taken care of here. So my dad came and got me and pulled me out of that situation. But I guess my grandma said like that I had the same diaper on, no bottle and stuff like that. There was a little abandonment stuff early on. And then when I was, I would say about 11, my dad worked a lot. So I got dropped off at the babysitter's house, which was one of my dad's really good friends. And his wife had a son, and it happened two times. In the beginning, it was fine. And then like he would creep in the room at night. He was like 14, and like he would like sexually play with me and stuff like that. And I remember saying no. And then I remember going through this whole thing so here I am with my dad's side, and my dad's Scottish and Irish. So I had this idea of, am I white? Am I Christian? Am I Native? Like struggling at a young age. And
your mom was Native American.
Yes, my mom's full blood Native American. And I struggled with this identity thing when I was younger. How is God gonna react, or how is God gonna treat me because that I was sexually played with? Am I garbage? Am I gross in God's eyes? Right. So I had these weird identity things going on.
Yeah.
And it happened a couple times, and I never said anything. Actually, the first time I said something was about 8 years ago, and I had it buried so deep that when people would talk about sexual abuse, I would say, oh man, that must have really sucked. I don't know, how can I support you? So it was buried so deep that I just chose to just completely ignore it, because I believed that
I chose not to let it define me
yeah.
until it just caught up and there was no escaping it. The doctor,
Yep.
they sent me to the psychiatrist, and she asked questions no one else ever asked me, and the dam broke.
I was actually at a Future Generations Collaborations, FGC. It's an amazing organization. We were doing some parenting stuff, and we also did some suicide stuff. And I never thought that the things that I did in my addiction was almost like I wasn't afraid to die. So in my head, it was like, oh man, there's so many times that I tried to commit suicide without realizing that was trying to commit suicide. And it opened up the floodgate of, oh, hey, what internally had me doing these things? And the thing that I came back to was the sexual abuse when I was younger. Right. And so then it was like, I need to take the power out of this. Hey, like, this is what happened, and this is how I happened. So that definitely opened some things for me. When I was 11, my dad was, this is hard. When I was 11, my dad still brought me there to have a place to babysit or whatever. And then his older sister, the person that was my abuser, his older sister was like 26, 27. And she was also playing with me. But at this time, it was in my head, it was like, it's okay because it's a woman. And then, so man, I lost my virginity at a very young age. And then sexually, like, it manifested in so many different like ways, and like how I respond, how I treated women, how I womanized, how I traded one addiction for another. So there's a lot of deep-seated trauma in the sexual abuse. And then my dad got married like when I was actually about 6, going back a little bit. And I felt like, in a sense, that my dad was choosing a woman over me, because some of my happiest years is when I was younger and when it was just me and my dad. Now I love that woman with all my heart. She's my mom. She never did anything abusive in that sense, right? She was just my dad's, and I used to call her by her first name, and I never looked at her like a mom, but I'm so blessed to have her now. But when I was young, I felt, here I am alone, abused, and not by her. Yeah, not by her, but abandoned by my mom. And so many things, like, so the abandonment issues, and then also the sexual abuse. So it started at an early age. I left home when I was probably about 15. I would leave home and then just be gone for 2 weeks and stay at friends' house and go to school and wear other people's clothes and stuff like that. So I wasn't wearing the same clothes and stuff like that. It showed itself as, I'm okay by myself then. Like, I don't need nobody else. Like, I'm not loved. I'm not needed. I'm not valued. And now that I look back on it now, I was totally loved and totally valued and totally raised in a good way.
Right.
But as being young and those things happening, it really messed with my head, my identity of who I was, right?
Totally understand. Yeah.
I think the healing aspect and a part that really spoke to my spirit was that my dad also grew up around Native Americans. My dad was a hippie, like, and he grew up around natives, and then obviously he was with my mom, and then so my dad picked up things like Sweat Lodge and certain things like that that spoke to my spirit and made me feel whole. And I knew that I was different. And I grew up in Montana, so it was very white. It was very white, and it was very, and I remember one time we were going on a vacation to Seattle. Cause like I said, I had really good parents, right? We were going on a vacation to Seattle, and we were at a gas station, and I seen another family, and they were dark. And just because of whatever, I thought, oh my God, they're so dirty. They're like, I just want to be like my family. And I remember that sometimes I would try to wash my face and my hands and my arms to the point that I would rub the pigment off my skin to fit in with my family.
Wow.
And that was definitely something that was hard for me, and I struggled with because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was. I was just this sexually abused, abandoned, that had no idea about the world or my traditions or my culture or anything. I just knew that I didn't look like the rest of my family.
You're a gorgeous golden brown. Yeah. Something I always wanted.
I used to tan a lot when I was younger. What's the deal, right?
Yeah. So that was my journey when I was younger, right? And that's what I remember that stuck out when I did the internal work of like where everything came from, where and why my addiction started.
Absolutely.
I think it first started with drinking and smoking weed in high school, and then experimenting with speed. And I found my place, and I found
You fit in.
Yeah, I fit in with other misfits. I fit in with people that had struggles. I fit in with people that used drugs because they knew what had experienced. But I didn't put voice to it. I didn't say, "Hey, I don't know who I am." I didn't say like I was sexually abused. I didn't say these things. I just knew I felt safe in a place like that. And like looking back at it now, like how does someone feel safe not knowing who they are, being sexually abused and in drugs and alcohol? That was where I felt safe. That's where I felt free. That's where I felt where I could be me, right? And
It was like my subconscious, and I can voice it now that I just want to be like everybody else. I want to be treated like everybody else. I want to have the same opportunities and so forth. But back then, I think it was more of I wanted to feel comfortable, and those people I was drawn towards the people and the things that.
yeah.
And when you're in addiction, you accept everybody just to get to that addiction, right?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Drugs gave me courage. I was a badass. Just saying, like, I ran the world. I mean, in my mind. Yeah.
100%. Right. And so moving forward at that age, 15, 16, going to Job Corps, getting kicked out of Job Corps. And I grew up in the woods, right? And that's when this whole MTV move of like rap and all these things really started to take off, like from 91 to 96. Like,
Run DMC.
Yeah. Like 91 to 96. And here I am, like this kid stuck out in the woods. Like I fucking hated being out in the woods. There was only so much fishing and swimming and stuff that I could do, right? And I just wanted to get out into the world and experience it. And I wanted to get away from myself. So I ran. I left home. Went Coeur d'Alene, tried to live with my aunt. That didn't work.
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho?
Wow. We tried to go to Coeur d'Alene and went to high school there, and that didn't work. And then eventually I just basically left home for a little bit, then came back, and then ended up at 17. I had to go down and get my GED and then take the ASVAB test, and I scored really high on the ASVAB test. But there was some things that I had gotten in trouble with too. So it wasn't like, oh, hey, like I want to go to the military. It was more like, hey, you need to go to the military or you're probably going to go to prison. Because even though I was out in the woods, I was still getting loaded. I was still like committing burglary and robbing neighbors and stuff like that for like stuff that they had, guns and stuff like that, and would bury them, and really had no reason to steal. It was just something that gave me like a rush. And I remember dumping like comment in the coffee at the community center. Yeah, so there was a lot of shit, and it was ugly shit. And then I got caught on some of those things, and it was juvie or it was prison down the road. So we decided, and what I mean by we is my dad and my mom, Connie, the woman that raised me, that, hey, like he needs to get out of here because bad things could happen. And so I went into the military, and when I was in the military, I went to boot camp, went to my MOS school in 29 Stumps in Palm Springs. And when I was there, I was drinking, obviously, and in the military, I was drinking heavily. But I was also smuggling coke and speed into the squad bay, because that's just what I knew. Was I could be a super Marine if I just got some good shit, And
Camp too, in prison.
A different kind of boot
yeah,
camp.
different kind.
And so the only civilians really that worked on the base were, and I was stationed in Pogus, which is Camp Pendleton, but yeah, so I was in there, and in the squad bay, I met this Filipino guy that he worked in the chow hall, but he was a civilian. And I could tell one day that he was just zipping around the kitchen. and I was like, dude, so I just pulled him to the side, and I was like, so, man, what's up, man? I need some of that shit. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so a couple of more times went by, and I was like, hey, bro.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a good dude. I'm not going to fucking tell on you. I'm not going to rat on you. Just bring me some shit. So he would start putting the meth in the bathroom inside the toilet roll dispenser, or it wasn't meth back then, it was prop dope. Actually, when it was actually good.
Before they outlawed the chemical.
Yeah,
that's my time.
Yeah, before they outlawed the H2 propylene. But yeah.
You're the first person that said that, like on our podcast. I didn't like, if it was dirty dope, I didn't like it because it broke out my face.
Yeah.
I liked ephedrine dope better because it was clearer. Yeah.
Not me. I liked the Red Foss, and I liked the lemon drop and the peanut butter.
Peanut butter's the one that broke out my face. Yeah. And it wasn't attractive if you're going on an escort call to have a broke out face.
Right.
Yeah. I learned really quick not to pick at my face.
Yeah. No. So that was my thing, man. And then I was there for a while, and somebody told on me, and I popped. And so I spent 5 months. I popped on the piss test, and I spent 5 months in the Camp Pendleton brig. And once I got into the brig, that was my first experience of being like locked up and
military locked up.
And my first thing to do was to fight, be an asshole, all the things that I wasn't, to protect myself. So I spent a lot of my time in the hole, and back then in the hole, it was basically a hole that you shit in and a blanket and a pillow, and that was about it. No books. No, nothing else.
Worse than jail in prison.
Yeah. And the DSSD diet was a disciplinary supplement something diet, right? So, like in the chow hall, fucking, everybody had like double cheeseburgers and all of these things. And like here I would be with like a patty and 4 fries. So it was like, and in my head, like I'd be in there eating. And when you're in solitary for a while, your head starts to run. And I could just picture like fucking hamburgers being thrown around, and everybody was eating and laughing. And
that's serious stuff.
Here I am stuck in this place, right?
No books.
Nothing to take my mind away. Thoughts manifesting, and I had some pretty horrible thoughts in there, and it was pretty bad.
Did you also go through detox through being in there?
I slept the best I could because it wasn't any physically dependent drugs that I was on then. It was more
meth makes you just get tired afterwards, big time.
Yeah. So after the dope wore off, I slept and stuff like that. So not really a detox, but more of a, damn, I fucked up. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I got out of the military with a BCD, which is a bad conduct discharge. They call it a big chicken dinner. So I got out of there, and I didn't leave with a big chicken dinner because I didn't fucking eat anything while I was in there. So I was soaking wet, maybe 135 pounds. Got out of there, and when I got out of there, I stayed in San Diego for about a year and a half running the streets in California. And man, I burglarized, robbed, did so much to stay loaded, and also just met people that were aligned themselves with me. I remember staying with like many different families and many different places. So I learned how to be okay on my own with no money. What I was doing wasn't positive. It was definitely a lot of dope and drugs and selling drugs and robbing people. So it was pretty rough.
Yeah.
And then I finally got tired of it. And after I left California, I think I headed back to Montana, and then I had this great idea to come to Oregon to finally visit my mom, right? And then maybe I thought I would find myself or find something that would,
The part was it was missing.
yeah, the part that
Right.
was missing. And I got out here, and I remember my mom picking me up at the bus station, and she had some weed, and they had some crank. And so the first thing I did was like, oh, this is fucking awesome. And they had just got a big settlement because her husband burned up in a fire. So they had some land and they had a bunch of drugs. So I was like, oh, this is fucking great.
Hello,
Right.
Mom.
Hello, Mom.
I missed you. Yeah.
Hello, Mom. And then it was probably some of the worst times of my life. I stayed numb and high and loaded for a long time. And it was rough. And then a big struggle with drugs and alcohol then. And by this time, I think I'm around like my 20s. So I ended up in Lincoln City. And my mom's sister, she let me come live with them and stuff like that. And as soon as I got down there, there was so much drugs and shit like that. And I just ran around and stayed loaded for a while. Ended up in Salem and then meeting up with a couple of my native cousins. And we'd ride around in Cadillacs and steal clothes and try to go look for girls, like that song Scrubs, hanging outside of your best friend's ride. That was totally me.
I don't want no scrub.
Yeah, no, that was totally me. And I still didn't know who I was as far as like a person from then until 33. And in Oregon, I just stayed loaded, drunk, high on meth, high on crank. And I remember the last bit of crank I seen, there was a little bit of meth. It was like 6 months into the meth, clear stuff showing up, and somebody had a big bag of crank, and I was like, oh, I remember that shit. That's good shit. So I stayed loaded on that for a while, and man, and then I went to meth, and then once I went to meth, it was all over. Like I just stayed loaded for so long. I remember doing a lot of bad shit, more robbing people and just hurting people and stealing and just this horrible, horrible person that I was becoming. And I was always loud and energetic and drunk and did a lot of things and hurt like my family, my mom's side of the family, and would just use people for whatever I could to have a place to stay and a place to get loaded. And so for, I would say, 13 years, I just dove into drugs and alcohol. There was a time in there that I had met someone, my kids' mom, and I had my oldest daughter. And when I had my oldest daughter, I was living in Grand Ronde, and we were just still smoking oxys. Like, so oxys came in, and there was a hustle that we had, and I don't even know the statutes of limitation or if we got caught, so I'm not going to mention too much about it, but there was a hustle that we had to where we got $600 a day, $600 to $800 a day. And so over a year and a half, we smoked like 4 to 5 80s, oxy 80s a day. And when we didn't have it, I was sick as a fucking dog. And the only way to kick my opiate addiction was, in my head, was to just do more meth. I was the guy on the reservation that nobody wanted to be there. I sold a lot of pills and dope to my own people, stayed away from my kids, hurt a lot of people. I hurt a lot of native people. And I knew like natives sweat and they did these kind of things. And so, but I respected the fact that if you're using, not to go to ceremony, not to do those kind of things. So I stayed away from ceremony. I stayed away from a lot of things that now have saved my life. But then I just was just like, whatever. I just pushed it to the side. And then my son was born. I was high as a fucking kite. I didn't even leave. Oh my gosh, I didn't even see my son, but maybe once or twice by the time he was like 10 months to a year old. And then my youngest daughter was born, and I ended up going to treatment. Her family, my kid's mom family, wanted to kill me because I fucking, you know, in a sense, like destroyed their daughter, got her loaded, got her high, did a lot of shit like that. And I knew there was something else out there, but I didn't know what it was. But I knew that I wasn't living the way that I should be living. I ended up going to treatment. I was in treatment for about a month. And then I met a guy in there, and he was getting oxy smuggled in there. So we're sitting there smoking oxys at the top of the frickin', and the treatment was in Eugene at the top of the treatment center. We'd sneak up and we'd smoke oxys, and I was still getting loaded. And then I told my counselor to fuck off, and they basically kicked me out. So I left and found some dope on the streets, and ended up in jail. I was flying down Lancaster in Salem. I don't know if you guys know that street, but
I was at the women's penitentiary behind OSP.
nice.
Yes.
So when I was saying flying, I was literally flying. One day I had been up for so long that I was walking down Lancaster, and I started to take my clothes off. And then I know they can't see my arms, but I was like one of birds just gliding, like slowly flapping my wings. And I was flying down Lancaster, and somehow I ended up in my underwear. So I was in my underwear, and I ended up in front of Chemeketa. And like I had flown.
Chemeketa Community College.
Yeah, I had flown to Chemeketa, and then I remember trying to grab a jacket. And someone said that. Somebody was like, "Hey, you weird fucker, that's my jacket. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Fuck you, I don't need you." And then I got off this little perch that I was on. And then I my wings started to really go, right? I was like, okay, I'm out of here. So then I'm really flapping my wings, and I'm flying down the road. And in my head, like I was flying higher than everyone else, and I was looking down, right, on everybody. And then when I was flying, I was like, okay, like I am getting close to Creator. I really need to get there. So then I really started to really flap my wings and soar. And then fucking all of a sudden the blueberries and cherries were there. The cops pulled me over, and they asked me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Fuck you. I don't need to talk to you. Red Eagle don't talk to sinners." He was like, "Give me your name." And I was like, "Give me some water." And he was like, "What are you doing out here with no shoes on?" And I was like, "I'm on a spiritual journey." And he was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Do you have anything on you or anything?" I said, "No, I don't have anything on me. The only thing I have on me is my spirit, and that's the only thing that I need. I don't need you. Get away from me." And he was like, "Okay." And then this time more cops were showing up, and he's, "I'm going to need you to sit down." And I was like, "Birds don't sit down. They fly." So I'm sitting there, and I'm flapping my wings. And he was like, "Give me your name." And I told him, "Give me some water." I was fucking thirsty, man.
Yeah.
Been flying
You've
a long
been flying
time.
for a while,
I've been flying for a while. Like, I'm thirsty. I was like, "So give me," and this went on for a couple minutes. "Give me your name. Give me some water." Finally, this cop walked it, because we were out in front of a Safeway on Lancaster right at the end there. This cop went in and bought a bottle of water and gave me some water. And then I was like, "I'm Jerrod Murray, my protection." So I sold myself out
Hey, when you're flying,
I ended up in jail, and when I was in jail, I started to come to a little bit, and I was like, okay, like I had gotten some sleep, and I was in jail, and then my kids' mom was at Nara with the kids treatment center, and I would call, and she was like, "You need to figure something out, or you'll never, you need to be a part of your kids' life." And I'm going to treatment, and I had already left treatment. I remember I said, "There's no way I'm going to make it there unless they transfer me to treatment," because I didn't have the power to stay clean on my own. So I ended up in treatment. I got transported to treatment. I got transported to Nara, and I had one outfit. That's it. And when I got there, I was court mandated to be there. I had to complete outpatient. I had to do all these things, because before, in the past, when I left jail, it was like, check in and then catch me if you can, Mr. Gingerbread Man, because I'm fucking out of here. I can't piss clean. I can't do this. So I would just leave. They transferred my probation up to Portland, or my post-prison up to Portland, and then went to treatment. And in treatment, it was, at first it was like, I don't want to fucking be here. I don't have to do anything that you guys tell me to do. And I met this man there, Jubal Perkins. He was a traditional man, a ceremony man, and he would have me go to sweat there at Nara, and I would go to sweat. And then he took me to my first like Sundance sweat, first ceremony sweat off of the property. And I just really started to be like, okay, this is what it is to be Native, and this is what it is to
Did you feel like you belonged for the first time outside of the drug world?
That was the first time in my life
Amen.
I felt connected to something greater than myself, right? It was the first time that I felt at home. It was the first time that I felt loved. It was the first time that I felt anything positive since I was 15 years old. Like my dad did.
Maybe even two. Yeah.
Like my dad did the best that he could, and I loved him for everything he did for me. And I love him to this day. And the woman that helped raise me, I love her to this day. But there was just something missing back then. And I had finally found what was missing. So I ended up meeting this guy, Jubal, and then he poured the sweats at Nara. He was one of the maintenance men, and he really saved my life, or opened my eyes to something to where I could start to do the work to save my own life. So that ceremony piece was a really huge piece. And by the time that I left treatment, I was connected as far as Sweat Lodge, and I had a ceremony family outside of that, Sundance family outside of that, and I went to outpatient, and I graduated outpatient, but I wasn't even at my own outpatient because I was up on the hill in ceremony, but they graduated me anyway. And
What is up on the hill for those? And I'm not familiar with.
Up on the hill is more of a vision quest, or for 4 days, no food, no water. And then after Vision Quest, I went into ceremony, which is Sundance. I don't want to speak too much about Sundance because then it takes the sacredness out of it.
Sure.
But it's a very powerful ceremony that really helped me save my life. But I did no work, right? I had found something that was greater than myself, but I did no work on self. So I basically just transferred all these drugs and all these mixed emotions and lost identity and abandonment for ego, womanizing, and all these things that made me feel like I was important. I hurt a lot of women as far as just like sleeping with women and hurting them before they could hurt me emotionally. For 5 years into my sobriety, I was a really big dirtbag, and my kids' mom had the kids, and then when I was in my Oxford house, I had to take the kids because she went to treatment. And I remember thinking, God, she needs to get out of fucking treatment because this is so hard. Like, I'm going to school to better myself. And I didn't. In my head, the excuse was it's easier to go to school and it's easier to do these things because I'm building a life for my kids, when really I was just being selfish. Mm-hmm. And her going to treatment, coming back, and her going to treatment, coming back a couple times really prompted me to do something different. But it also, my oldest daughter, she was staying with family, and something happened as far as what happened to me when I was younger. And that's when I was like, what the fuck am I doing? This is starting to affect my children, my oldest daughter. So I made the decision to really change and take control of my life, but also to do the internal work and to keep my kids. And so basically, I've had my kids ever since that happened, right? And there was a thing that happened at ceremony that made me really realize, and I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I had seen all the people that I had hurt, and there was like tears and stuff like this, and during ceremony. And then on the other side of this thing that I had seen was my children, and they were sad. And so when I came out of there, it was like, I have to make this decision to so my kids have a life. And that's when everything really started to change, and it really started to really do some internal work, college, and finished my associates and got my CDC one, did my internship, all that stuff. And then I never became a counselor. I just accrued a lot of debt, and I was still sleeping on in other people's houses with my kids on the floors and stuff like that. And finally it came to a point that we had got on this Central City Concern housing list, and we had got an apartment, and it was the first time that I had never had my kids in an apartment that was mine. And so my son had his own room, my daughter shared a room, and then I slept in the living room. I had a bed in the living room. So it felt good to have that, but I also knew that I was very codependent on the government, right? Like my rent was $100 a month. I got $1,200 in food stamps, and I got all of these things like health benefits, all that stuff was free. And I was like, man, I found the lick. This is great. But then people that I engaged with that were in recovery, and they were like, you could be so much more. You could do so much more. And I was like, if you don't have me a job making more than $25 an hour, like, why would I even get off this? Because I'd be struggling more if I had to pay full rent, if I had to pay for my own health care, if I had to buy my own food. Like, what are you doing? The system is, and in my head, like, I didn't know the system was set up for me to stay codependent on the government and
Right, exactly.
really not be more than what I was or could be. Like, because a lot of times, even like on reservations, there's liquor stores and a half a grocery store, usually not even that, and a lot of drugs. And so it's never be more than what you are, right? And thought process like that really helped me too moving forward as I started. So after treatment, we started the first Wellbriety that stuck here in Portland. We were drumming outside of NARA and singing because we weren't allowed in. So we just stood in the NARA outpatient parking lot and had our first Wellbriety meeting there. And then we ended up leaving there, and somehow we ended up in the Alano Club parking lot drumming and singing. And then I remember people being like, shut the fuck up, we're trying to sleep. So we ended up in the Alano Club basement, and that Wellbriety meeting is still there.
And explain for those who may not understand what Wellbriety.
Wellbriety is the native way for the 12 steps. Basically, more of a cultural connection, because Bill and Bob's AA and Scully's, where you have white people that have 40 years clean and they're alcoholics, it feels weird for young natives getting out of treatment and going to certain AA meetings that had strongholds in Portland. So we basically knew that we had to create something for ourselves. Now there's multiple Wellbriety meetings in Portland. We have 3 Wellbriety meetings at Painted Horse, and also there's Wellbriety meetings from that first Wellbriety meeting that are in Pendleton now, that are in Warm Springs, and one in Klamath Falls. So from that first meeting, now there's a lot of Wellbriety meetings.
Inspiration for you was you were in this government subsidized housing, feeling trapped in a way.
Yeah.
And someone approached you and said you could be so much more. And
Yeah.
so that's what prompted you to pursue putting the meeting together in the first place.
So yes and no. Prior to me being in that housing, the Wellbriety meeting was a couple years, but the first Wellbriety meeting was a couple years before that. And then once I got into the housing and I was feeling trapped and I was feeling like just really codependent on the government, and I was approached like, hey, you could do so much more. You could do more in the community. You could do more things like that. And then I used to just like sweat and do stuff like that and feel like, hey, I'm doing my part. Like I'm sweating, doing these things and wherever I can in the community. And it wasn't until I remember I got on a Section 8 list, and then I moved to the Madrona, which is like some Section 8 housing. But right before I left Hazel Heights, I had met with my buddy Bo Rappaport, which he was really instrumental in bringing Wellbriety here and being one of the first people to really bring Wellbriety. And we all worked together, and the natives in the community, and really supported him in Wellbriety. And we really found this place. And so I had approached my buddy Bo and was like, hey, we need a space for natives, because after treatment, like there's nothing for us unless just to sweat once or twice a week or go to this Wellbriety meeting. We need more. And he introduced me to, and I knew Tony from college.
Tony Vicina.
Yeah. I knew him from college before, and we hung out a little bit, but back then he really wasn't someone that I aligned myself with.
Kicked it with.
Yeah,
Right.
just because we were after different things. He was president, he was all of these things, and I was just trying to sleep with as many women as I could get my degree, and we were on different tracks, right? But I remember, and this is sorry for going back and forth, but I remember being in college and then leaving college. I went to Standing Rock, and then when I was in Standing Rock for a couple months, I really realized that it was really beautiful to see all these different Native people coming together for such a beautiful cause that I needed to do something for the community. And when I came back, it was hard for me because I wanted to do something, but there was nothing I could do because I didn't know how, or I didn't have the people. It's not what you know, even
It's who
about
you
your
know
own
sometimes.
culture. It's who you know, right? And being able to meet up with Tony again and really discuss what it was that I was trying to do. I was really brought onto this. This is peer services, and this is what we do in peer services, and this is how we can help your community. And I said, well, I'm all in. I'm all in. And I've really had my own, even though 4D is our fiscal sponsor, like I've really had my own path to create what was created. And I don't like to say it was me. I like to say it was like 6 or 7 of us that crawled in the lodge in the mud and prayed for something for many years. So it's years. So I definitely guided by creator, definitely guided by my creator that has allowed the people in my path in my life to create what has been created. So I wouldn't say it was me or mine. I would say it's my higher power and ours, because that's truly what it is.
That's being gracious. Do you know what I remember? And I wrote it down. And I say it all the time because it was one of your most brilliant moments for me. Reach for the ceiling, but the sky is the limit. Do you remember I made you repeat it and I was taking notes?
Yeah.
But that's what you've done, man. Reach for the ceiling, but the sky is the limit.
And in some ways, your experience, even though I have a saying, everything has a reason, there's a reason for everything. Your experience and what you went through, as tough and as rough and as horrible as it was at times, you have that now to look at a fresh person and to say, I understand you. And they can take credit in you. Just like you were saying, Native Americans going into a old white man's meeting, it's hard to look at them and say, yeah, you get me. But you do. You are of the cloth, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, I knew that what saved me was ceremony, connection to culture, connection to who I am, connection to earth, connection to my community is what saved my life. I did the work to get there, but if it wasn't for all of those things, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, right? If I had to do the traditional and that, I probably would be loaded by now, just because I didn't feel needed, valued, or loved in those spaces, right? So I had to create my own space, my
Where you
own
felt
lane,
you belonged.
where I felt I belong. And I thought to myself, how beautiful would that be if there was a space for natives to have that, right? So that's really pushed Painted Horse. And Painted Horse Recovery is culturally specific, peer delivered services. We help people reacclimate back into life after treatment or prison, and we lead with culture. And that's finding the connection to earth, connection to spirit, connection to culture is what really helps our community and what really heals our community. Because we come from a lot of broken spaces, a lot of broken things happen on the reservation. Some happen in the cities with urban natives to where they really don't get to be who they are and connect with their spirit.
It gives them a foundation. I think it's different for all of us. I go to AA and I've never blackout drunk, right? I'm not a drinker.
Yeah.
I went to an NA meeting and there was a person flying, okay, to say the least. And I felt uncomfortable. And it gave me a foundation just to find someone I trusted. And it's the same for you. It's a different format. I love that.
Yeah.
And I love like when somebody can get a sense of belonging and feel safe because I know now and it's just come to my awareness. Okay. And I've been sober a long time, but I, like you, just dove into some issues that I kept suppressed for 56 years. And I was always making my move for the next safe place. Like coming out of prison from the escort service, I didn't know that a gay men's meeting was my safe place. I didn't know because they didn't want to sleep with me, right? It was as safe as I could fucking get.
Yeah.
And I think a safe place where you feel you belong
Where
is
you belong
everything.
and where you feel comfortable. My first meeting that I got sober, my first group where I got sober, I couldn't fully be my honest, true self because they were very conservative and very much by the book. And so it wasn't until later, 5 or 6 years later, that I found the group that I'm like, you're my people. I feel I belong. That's helped me stay sober for the last 7 years.
Oh, that's
It's
That's why I
wonderful.
wanted you on the show, right? It not only for your story, right? But for the person, right? That needs your community. The whole point behind the podcast is maybe you're trans, right? Let us get you to true colors, right? You're Native American. Man, we got Jerrod for you to welcome you home. You know what I'm saying? And because recovery is important. And it's
The other common theme in all the people we've talked to is that peer mentorship. No, someone who's been there, who's just like you, that you can look up to and take hope from.
yeah.
I love tell our listeners your no harm thing. Because I love that. When we were doing the role playing in class, and you're like, meet them where they're at.
So basically, like my philosophy is meet someone where they're at, and you don't want to direct them to do anything, right? And like you utilizing MI, you break down that ambivalence, right? So if you meet someone where they're at and you don't judge them, because there's many different pathways to recovery, as we just discussed. There's many different pathways to recovery. You can cause harm by implementing your story in some spaces or your beliefs on someone. So
Agreed.
to really check your biases, implicit and explicit, to understand that there's going to be many different walks and many different stories and many different things happening with people, to where when you're a mentor, you have that lived experience, but you're not going to push your experience on someone else, because you could cause them
Damage.
You could cause them more damage. You could create harm by implementing your story, and that might not be their thing. Like I said,
I want you to know, like the class, right? I didn't go into the class wanting to be a mentor, but more wanting to learn the role.
Yeah.
And I was talking for a week to Peter. Oh my God, I learned so much. And it was probably the most educational thing I've ever done. And I've gone to college. I run a division of a company. Like, in doing no harm, it made me really open my mind to how many different ways there are recovery, not just my way. That there's, I think I used to think medication assisted treatment, that's not real recovery. Oh, yes, it is.
Yes.
And look,
100%.
I'm just telling you, my mind opened up so much.
Yeah.
And it made me not feel bad about getting medication for other issues. I know a lot of people in recovery have anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
So I just, it wasn't until you did the role playing, like that shit bloomed for me. Yeah. It really did. Like you were so sincere and in reality, like it was so good. And for those of you who don't know, Jerrod is one of the teachers in the Certified Recovery Mentor class, and a lot of good different perspectives in that class.
Yeah. And the CRM training that we do is it's a part of Peer Solutions, and Peer Solutions helps with continuing education units, and it also helps people get certified. But we take it very serious because we don't want to hurt people in recovery, and we don't want our mentors hurting people or pushing something on someone that's not their way, right? So being very understanding of different communities, being very understanding in different belief systems and different things that make people tick, or where they can connect, or where they can feel safe. So creating this safe place. And I really give a lot of love and respect to Tony V for bringing along other communities, so other communities could find connection in their own community. He doesn't try to get into what we do or how we do it at Painted Horse. There's an admin aspect that,
I actually think that's his greatest asset.
Yeah.
Having an Amanda, having a Jerrod, right? Giving different spaces to different people, right? I actually think not just the 4D, right? But giving you a voice that
yeah,
is special.
yeah. And there was people that gave him that space too. So he's just giving freely what was given to him by people like Anthony Jordan and Deborah Buffalo Boy and Eric Martin. And there's so many people that
Eric
came.
Martin comes up a lot.
There's so many people that came before us that freely gave what was given to them, right?
Mike Marshall. Yeah.
So in recovery, we continue to just, even in your AA book or your Wellbriety, whatever, just give away what was so freely given to you.
I think that's the only way you keep it.
Yeah, and exactly, and that is how you keep it. And so to be able to just be a part of something that's healing and helping other people heal, like that's the beauty in what we do. Like sometimes doing the admin stuff, like I don't like doing the admin stuff and I don't like doing this stuff, but I do it because we have to keep everything funded. We have to keep doing these things. And so my vision was to always be with the people there in the trenches, and my journey has changed. And that's not so much my journey now. My journey is more like, how do we sustain this? Because this is really helping people. And like, I struggled with that. But like, the one thing that I do know and that I do understand is if you do the next right thing one day at a time in any space, that you're bringing healing. And
I'm going through a transition and it's not easy. I'll go to IOP tonight from 6 to 9 and I have to not worry about, I met with HR this morning. I have to stay in today, stay with you in this mission and just take today, else my brain can go crazy. Yeah.
No, 100%. And I think the beauty about it all is, and this was said to me by one of my elders, is don't believe the hype that people say about you. Remain
Humble.
in the journey. Remain doing what is spirit is driving you to do. And just know that you're just a man and you're just a man in recovery. And to me, like, that has really spoke volumes to me. And one of my spiritual advisors really said that to me. And it's really went so far because understanding that it's bigger than us.
I've seen some people get some big heads.
Yeah.
I hear you. Yeah. I got a big head in a different way. It wasn't really on the recovery side, climbing up the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
And it's not everything.
Yeah.
My recovery is so
much more important. And
changing one life.
Yeah. And when you stay grounded in recovery and you stay in that understanding of you're doing the work that is bringing healing to communities, that you're doing exactly what your higher power intended you to do.
I think that's what Peter and I are trying to do. I think we've come about it with some open minds, and I've been blessed. Peter is the tech genius as we sit here in Peter's house, and I've been fortunate because I've really been in my recovery. I've always been in my recovery, but I have been dedicated to my recovery since I started dealing with those past issues. Yeah. And that's just been the last couple of years. Before then, I was focused on being successful and sober. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I never stopped going to meetings.
Yeah.
But it's a different path now. Peter we just talked about it in this house one day. And making it really happen and the stories we've shared has been everything.
Yeah. Well, for people interested in Painted Horse, what would they find going there? What is it like there?
Painted Horse it's like a home away from home. And what I mean by that is people coming from different reservations or people coming from wherever they come from are urban natives. There's either some elk stew going or we have events and people are beading and they're making moccasins and they're reconnecting with who they are. They can get a mentor and they can go to sweat and then they can set goals and they help accomplish these goals. Basically, what they can find at Painted Horse is their home and their connection to themselves and their spirit and their identity of who they are and what it is to be sober in a cultural way. And I think sometimes as Native Americans, we get lost in this identity of we're alcoholics or we live off the government or we do these things, right? And that's why I also chose to be the chief petitioner of Measure 1 or the recriminalization, is because on reservations we have everything given to us as far as being codependent to the government. You have low rent, you get a stipend of money that you usually 9 times out of 10 will spend on alcohol or drugs, and you get food boxes and you get these things, right? So it creates this ceiling, and housing first, and it's okay to be loaded, and here's just some clean needles, put that on your wound, little guy, you're going to be okay. That create this idea of it's okay to be just what you are.
Right.
And no, you're creating a ceiling. You can reach through the ceiling, but you can also bust through that motherfucker. You can bust through that ceiling, and you can be whatever creator intended you to be by doing it one day at a time, staying safe, and also taking care of yourself in your recovery. And you will also find that at Painted Horses, dedicated mentors that will continue to support people. We had somebody find housing 17 times, like I had spoken in the training, and the mentor was finally just, I'm done getting this person housing. And I said to the mentor, you might be the only person in this person's life that never gave up on them. That
Right.
never gave up on them. Right. And they keep showing up. So they care about something. They care about living.
Yeah.
And that changed that mentor's whole. Now that person has seven months clean, I think, or 8 months clean, and is in the same house. Who knows if they relapse or they don't, or what that looks like. But guess what? If they do or they don't, we're still going to be right there supporting them.
That's
No,
awesome.
we've had some stories like that. And a person, I wasn't sure if they were going to make it or not, but I saw them show up
Yeah.
every day, and I saw them do the work,
Yeah.
and which made me like, it's not easy to pull one over on me because I have some pretty good life experiences.
Yeah.
But when I see you do the work, and it makes me want to show up even more.
Yeah. Sometimes I get lost in the admin side, and sometimes I have to go to the center to remember why I do what I do.
Crazy. I'm an admin genius. Running a call center in HR and those things, that part comes so easy to me because I wanted to be so professional, and I wanted to be so professional to hide the past and not have the molestation define me, the escort service define me, the IV drug use. I didn't want you to see that when you looked at me. I wanted you to see successful ass Julie. And I've been blessed. My daughter's never seen me do a drug.
Yeah,
And
that's
I've had her the whole, like, I'm lucky and I know it. I'm blessed. And there's different times in your life for different things, I believe. And right now is my time
Yeah.
for self-care and to give back.
No, that's beautiful. I remember one time that I seen this guy come in, and he was so broken and was just trying to get off drugs, and everything was cloudy. Like you couldn't really see, like when you look this person in the face and the eyes, you couldn't really see nothing but like despair and no hope. And the beauty in what we do is like seeing that spirit come back, that
It's a beautiful
that
thing.
shine in their eyes where they find themselves, and they're like, okay, and now this person has some clean time and has gotten his kids back, and that's what keeps me doing what I'm doing, and it instills hope even in my recovery today, right? And to remember that I too still am an addict, that I too still struggle with these things, right? So it's easy for me to take my judgment out of it. And what I mean by that is like, oh, this person might not make it, or this person. Instead, it's I get to be here to support, and no matter what, no matter what I think, or no matter what anybody else thinks, that this person matters and this person deserves a chance, and this person, whether it's the client or someone with a scarred past that works there, like we are not who we were in our addiction.
Right.
We are who we are becoming. And so when I mean reach for the ceiling, but go to the stars, is the main thing that I'm saying in that is like, there's so many created systemic systems that have created ceilings. There's so many things that create ceilings in so many different spaces that if you don't fall into that mold and you just believe in something greater than yourself, that anything is achievable and possible. Just like they tell kids, oh, you can be anything you want to be.
You can.
And to addicts, like, you can be anything that you want to be, right? If anything, you have more knowledge of life and understanding
Yes.
and lessons learned and life lessons learned that makes you who you are, and you are beautiful. Like, a lot of people that haven't done the work, that are not addicts or don't call themselves addicts, I wish that they would do Wellbriety or AA and do those 12 steps, because we'd be living in a much better place if people did
Right.
a lot more
Amen.
if people did a lot more internal work and on themselves. Am I still human? Am I still fallible? Yes. Do I still say ignorant shit? Yes. But I'm aware of it, right? And understanding to make the conscious choice to be better every day is something that I strive to do. People say, oh, Jerrod's done this or Jerrod's done that, or Jerrod is the ED of Painted Horse, and Jerrod is this, Jerrod is that. All of that shit fails in comparison to being a father, right? Everything else melts away. Like, being sober and creating a life for my children to where they don't have to go what I went through is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. For my kids to have their own bedroom and their own sense of security in their life. Yeah, I bought a house. I've done these things that recovery gives you, but I've only done these things for my children. And what I mean by that is I do the work for self, and I make sure that self is okay, and like through my sobriety and through my connection to culture and all those things. But at the end of the day, if I can create a better life for my children to where they don't have to deal with what I dealt with,
Right.
then I'm doing the next right thing. So it all goes back to my higher power, my sobriety. And if anything, like, if I was going to shoot a hope shot on this podcast, that it's okay to be a single father, to raise your kids and be present in your kids' life to build a better future for them, that's what I would say. Because to me, that's the most important thing that I've done in life and will ever do, regardless of the accolades that come.
It's the hardest job as well.
Yeah.
Single parent
Beautifully said. Yeah.
and breaking the cycle. I raised my daughter without drugs, put her through college, and yeah, I agree with you. And at first, when I went to AA, it was not to go back to prison, to make the parole officer happy, and to be a good mom. And all the things that happened to me have not happened to my child.
Yeah. Right. And so is addicts, like, breaking that systemic trauma, historical trauma, and that generational trauma is some of the greatest things we can do, regardless of what we do professionally or what we think other people want to see on the outside of who we are or what we are. Like, being able to break chains, in a sense, of what's held down, especially in the Native community, like the drinking, the sex abuse, the fighting. Like, you grow up thinking those things are okay, and that's the way that life is supposed to be. And if you could get your kids and the youth and people away from that life and away from those traumas, they don't have to experience that. And then
They can prosper.
they can prosper. Is other trauma going to happen in their life? Sure. Right. We all have a journey. Things might happen, but it gives us a foot ahead. And especially being Native, like, we have to be the best at what we do. We have to be the hardest working in some spaces to get what we need to get to even be on the same playing field. But once you get on that same playing field, you can soar. You can reach for the stars, because when you're on that same playing field, all that environmental stuff, all that stuff that happens systemically changes. We all put our shoes on the same way. We all do
And
these
hard work
things.
pays off.
Yeah, and to stay in this victim stance or this ideology that this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, I can't be better, is bullshit.
Right.
Like, we all are children of Creator, and we all have the opportunity to break through all these ceilings that people or things that have created us to hold us down.
Yeah.
And if you stay in this victim ideology, you're just creating a prison for yourself. You're creating walls. You're creating a ceiling. You're creating a door without a key. And when you can finally break out of that door or bust through that ceiling, you have the same opportunities, regardless of gender, identity, religion, race, sexual preference, regardless of all those things, you have the same opportunity that everybody else has. And that's, too, what I believe makes the recovery field great, but also, in a sense, America great. And I'm not saying, America's great, but what I'm saying is we're in a place to where we can level the playing field and we can be just as much or more than anyone else.
I love that. I love your God shot, your hope shot.
Thank you so much for being on our show and being so vulnerable and open with your story.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to inspire somebody out there, and
I
probably many
promise
more.
Thank you. Thank you.
I promise that. I appreciate you coming by as well.
Yep.
This is Julie.
This is Peter for the Real Recovery Podcast. Thank you, Jerrod.
Yeah. And this is Jerrod. And like I said earlier, you guys, the more Native Americans that you can get out here to speak on your podcast,
We will, I promise.
there's just so much for all of our communities to do better and be better.
To show those faces, to give hope to those out there still or those struggling,
Yeah.
I think is so important. So we'll continue our mission.
I promise you that.
Thanks
That's
for
why it was
listening.
so important
Thank you.
for me to have you.
Awesome.
So-
Thank you, guys.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks to each and every one of you for lending us your ears and hearts. Your engagement is what fuels our passion and keeps this podcast thriving.
We cherish the moments we share here and hope they resonate with you, whether you're on a daily commute, at the gym, or just taking a moment for yourself.
Make sure to head over to our website at realrecoverypodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to our newsletter for the latest insights and uplifting stories from our community delivered straight to your inbox.
Click that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player too, so you can keep up with every new episode. It's your support that keeps our conversation alive and meaningful.
And if our stories have touched you, consider using the donate button on our site. Your contributions, no matter the size, are deeply appreciated. They help us continue our mission of sharing hope and healing.
Join us beyond the podcast and follow our journey on social media. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and on X, formerly known as Twitter. All the links are on our site, so you can stay connected and be a part of the Real Recovery community every day.
Your likes, shares, and comments not only spread the message of recovery, but also remind us that we're all in this together.
So, until we meet again, remember that recovery is a journey, not a destination, and we'll be here to accompany you every step of the way to recovery, real recovery.
Thanks for listening.